Hello and thank you all for watching. This is Manny Sunny Sun for an astrological report. We'll be speaking about the symbolism of during a full moon or solar lunar eclipse here. The eclipse, from the Latin word eclipses, an astronomical event that happens when the Earth stands between the Sun and the Moon, generating a cone of shadow that darkens to the Moon. For that to happen, an eclipse that three heavenly bodies, that the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon, they must be aligned exactly or very close to be in such a way that the Earth blocks the sun rays that reach the satellite. That is why in eclipse, moles can occur in the phase of the Moon. The lunar eclipse here are classified as in partial or part of the Moon is hidden. Total or all the lunar surfaces enters the Earth's shadow's cone. That are called penumbrales. The Moon goes in the cone of the light of the Earth. The duration of that type of eclipse depends on the location of the Moon with regards to its orbital nodes. Here, unlike the solar eclipse, which can be seen from a relatively small part of the Earth and lasts for about a few minutes, a lunar eclipse has been seen from any part of the land which is at night and lasts for several hours. A cone of shape and it's the gloom of the moon eclipses. The diagram of lunar eclipse here, the Sun has an equatorial diameter of 109 times higher than that of the Earth, which is why it casts a shadow. A cone or a convergent and its divergent gloom makes a cone. So the eclipse occurs between the Moon, which is located about 384 kilometers, 384,000 kilometers of the Earth, enters into the Earth's shadow cone, long much greater. It's 1,384,584 kilometers in distance. That is the Moon of the Earth. The cone of the shadow has a diameter of 92,000 kilometers, 9,200 kilometers, while the diameter of the Moon is only 3,400 kilometers. This is a great difference it causes within the cone of the shadow between 265 times the Moon, and as a result the eclipse remains in their total phase for a prolonged period of time. So for an observer here that was located on the surface of the Moon, a penumbral eclipse here would be a partial eclipse of the Sun. Similarly, if the observer is found inside the cone of the shadow of the Earth, I couldn't see the star, so that for him he would be producing a total eclipse of the Sun. The Earth's atmosphere has a vital influence in the eclipse. If the atmosphere didn't exist, in each total eclipse of the Moon here would disappear completely. The thing that we know that does not happen. The Moon totally overshadowed, acquired a reddish color characteristic due to the refracted light of the atmosphere of the Earth. To measure the degree of darkening, the lunar eclipse is used to scale of darkens. The classification of the lunar solar eclipse here, the shadow of the Earth is projected on two parts, the umbra and the penumbra. In the umbra, there is no solar direct radiation. However, due to the increased size of the angle of the Sun, solar radiation is only partially blocked in the outer portion of the Earth's shadow, which receives the name of gloom. In this way, due to the different shadows, eclipses are classified as an eclipse. Penumbral eclipse occurs when the Moon passes through the darkness of the Earth. The twilight causes a subtle darkening on the lunar surface. If only a small part of the Moon enters into the region, the penumbral eclipse here resulting is very difficult to point to the naked eye and is called partial penumbra. A special type of penumbral eclipse is the penumbral total, in which the Moon goes completely in the twilight without going through the umbra. This last case of the penumbral eclipse is very uncommon, about 3 by century. Due to the width of the penumbral area, the difference between the internal diameter and the outer limit is only slightly larger than the diameter of the moon. In eclipses, penumbral total, the portion of the moon that is closer to the umbra, appears in a little darker than the rest. A partial eclipse occurs when only part of the moon enters the umbra. A total eclipse happens when the moon goes completely in that area of threshold. A special case of a total eclipse is a total central, in which the moon, in addition, passes through the Earth's umbra, makes it through the center of this. The duration and contacts. The duration of the lunar eclipse is determined by their contacts, which are the key stages of phenomenon. In a total eclipse, the measured contacts are P1. First contact, beginning of the penumbral eclipse. The moon plays the outer limits of the terrestrial twilight. EU. Second contact, beginning of the partial eclipse. The moon plays the outer limits of the Earth's umbra. U2. Third contact, beginning of the total eclipse. The lunar eclipse surface falls completely within the Earth's umbra. The maximum of eclipse stage of greater concealment of the eclipse. The moon is at its closest point to the center of the Earth's umbra. U3. Fourth contact, end of the total eclipse. The external point of the moon comes out of the Earth's umbra. U4. Fifth contact, the end of the partial eclipse. The Earth's umbra leaves the lunar surface. P2 or P4, the sixth contact, the end of the penumbral eclipse. The moon was completely free of the shadow of the Earth. A diagram of this contact in the eclipse will be posted down below. Logically, the 7 values only appear in total eclipse. In a partial eclipse, U2 and U3 were not submitted in a penumbral eclipse. U1, U2, U3, and U4 should not be measured. The greatest possible duration of an eclipse, that is to say the biggest difference between P1 and P2, is approximately 6 hours. In this eclipse, the center of the moon is concentric, exactly within the center of the Earth's umbra. Total eclipse central. In turn, the eclipse could remain in there for a total of 107 minutes. The distance between the moon and the Earth varies constantly, owing to the slight eccentricity of the lunar orbit. The maximum distance that can separate both celestial bodies is called a peak, and it is about 406,700 kilometers. The minimum distance as possible is 356,400 kilometers, called a perigee. The distance that separates the moon and the existing land during the eclipse affects the duration the same. When the moon is at its peak, its orbital speed is at least possible. The diameter of the umbra here not significantly decreases in between perigee and perigee. Since the limits of the umbra are almost parallel between, if this is due to the huge distance that separates the Earth from the Sun. Therefore, the eclipse are more durable as possible will be one that happens during the swing. The scale of Danjon. The main article is scale of Danjon. It's a subjective scale designed by André Louis Danjon between the years 1925 and 1950 to measure the darkening of the lunar eclipse surface. The Earth is blocking all the direct solar radiation that comes to the moon and osculates that surface. However, the particles in suspension present in the atmosphere refract part of the sunlight in the spectrum of the red. It is the same phenomenon that occurs during dawn and dusk, in which the sky takes a reddish or orange shade due to the nearly horizontal incidence of the sun's ray. So the moon gets in this radiation, which leads to taking the color light yellow or brownish red, which depend on the environmental factors. Terrestrial dust clouds or suspension or volcanic eruptions. Here, the physical distance between the moon and the center of the umbra. The degrees of darkening of the scale of Danjon with the letter I takes on the values from 0 to 4. Every value is defined by the following way. L0, very dark, almost invisible moon at the time of the maximum eclipse. L1, darkly gray or part dusk, few details visible. L2, red brick, often with a yellowish margin. And L4, orange or copper, very bright, sometimes with a margin of blue. This determination of values should I perform the maximum of the eclipse, beginning with the scale completely subjective. Different observers will have different values, and even every part of the moon will get a different values even of itself. Depending on your distance with regard to the center of the umbra. Well, thank you all for watching. This has been the symbolical nature of what happens during the moon, lunar, and solar eclipse. Thank you all for watching.